Smana is like very outgoing, compassionate. She has lot of friends and she always has a smiling face.
She is very smart girl. She was pretty good at like playing piano. One day she was sitting on the dining table and doing her homework, and suddenly she kind of collapsed. To see all the nurses pushing her in this long hallway, it is one of the most difficult scenes for a dad. It could be the last time I would have seen my daughter. That word cancer is kind of like a death sentence. But after coming to St. Jude, meeting a lot of other cancer survivors, it gives us hope.
I always knew that there is injured but never knew what it is until I experienced it. And after I saw a lot of people, how much loving and caring they are towards the people whom they don't know. That changed my heart a lot, that I also need to be like a looking forward to help the person who is in need, and that I also should be generous. That has impacted my life so much.
What I love about St. Jude is the people, because they're just so nice. You might not know them, but they're just so kind and so loving. The patients might be feeling down, but they make a way for kids to be happy. After treatment, I'm going to be stronger and better than I was before.
Oh, we love to see you every day. Now it's time for us to say, pack up your bags, get out the door. You don't get chemo anymore.
I never felt that there is something in this world who would care like this.
I thank the donors. I thank St. Jude. I don't know where we would be if not for St. Jude. She beat the cancer. We are going home.
Yeah.
Little Red Riding Hood. Let's start the story a different way. It was dark inside the wolf. Human beings are creative storytelling beings. They make art because that's what human beings do. As a writer, your goal is to keep your reader believing in your story, even though both of you know it's fiction. When I wrote The Handmaid's Tale, nothing went into it that had not happened in real life somewhere at some time. The reason I made that rule is that I didn't want anybody saying, you certainly have an evil imagination, you made up all these bad things. I didn't make them up. If you really do want to write and you're struggling to get started, you're afraid of something, remember, it's only you and the page. The wastepaper basket is your friend. It was invented for you by God. People are always coming up with new theories of the novel, but the main rule is, hold my attention. Any form of
Have you guys ever taken one of these
creativity is
master
the
classes
process of
before?
doing it and getting better at it. You become a writer by writing.
There's one
There
on
is no other way.
barbecuing and
So
smoking
do it more,
that I
do it
keep
better.
seeing Instagram ads for, and I kind of want to do it.
Somewhere out there, the other readers for you. I'm
Thank you, Cool and the Gang. Somehow my Zoom call got hijacked by Cool and the Gang. I'm not sure how that happened. How's everybody? Excellent, excellent. I'm so glad to hear that, because what I heard was we're spectacular. What other way is there to be, right? It's all choice. So you might as well pick spectacular. So for for you to know and be impressed with, yes, I did read all those books between 9:30 and right now. That's why there's only, I didn't get to these 3, so that's why they're still here. But I did clear those other ones. So there's really no excuse for you not reading if I could get rid of all those books in a day. All right, let's, I definitely want to get to some ahas from Jason Abrams. How many of you were on the Jason Abrams call? I don't know about you, but it's pretty awesome. If you all chose to skip that one, that was the wrong one to skip, because Jason's my new favorite human being on the planet, I think. So be thinking of some of those ahas for those of you who were on. A couple of quick things. Number one, I want to make sure that you all caught yesterday that Governor Lamont did extend the stay home, stay in place, don't leave your house, eat out of your freezer, whatever order, officially through May the 20th, right? So that did happen yesterday. In case you weren't aware, it was the end of April. It is now officially May 20th. I would expect that, Adonis, are you drunk?
No, just listening to the news.
Got it. So, odd that listening to the news and drunk seem like the same thing to me, but
that's one thing we would all expect Adonis to be.
Well, there you go.
At 4:30 on a Wednesday, is drunk.
So do know that minimally we're talking about another 4 to 5 weeks of this. It wouldn't surprise me if that meant through the end of June, which would be another week and a half on top of the 20th. It's kind of what we've been saying all along, right? That expect this through June the 1st, and now I think we just have confirmation of that. So don't be disheartened by that. Be heartened by the fact that by extending that through the end of through almost the end of May. My hope is that we continue to make smart choices. That has this be the only time we have to do this. Right, and I think that's where we have to look ahead to make sure that we don't come out of this too soon and have some resurgence or whatever. Because frankly, I'm not. I think I told you guys a couple of weeks ago that at the first sign of a zombie, I'm out. I'm happy to do whatever I can do, but first sign of a zombie, I'm out. Well, the other thing is that if we have to do this again in the same calendar year, I'm also out. So anything we have to do to make sure that this unique experience remains unique, I am all for. So that all that means to me is all the things that we've been talking about and putting together make sense and give you a solid plan forward, knowing full well that now we're at May the 20th, likely to be the end of May. The other update I wanted to give you is, and thank you to Milena for sending this to me, the Connecticut Rental Association, Rental Investment Association, or Real Estate Investors Association, I forget, CTREI or whatever they are. That group has petitioned Governor Lamont to reconsider his executive order with regards to landlords and tenants, arguing that it was very heavily favoring tenants. Many tenants have heard that executive order as you don't have to pay April and May. Right, that's not what that said, and yet that's how a lot of people have heard that executive order, and so they've petitioned Governor Lamont for a meeting next week to adjust on behalf of landlords. So for those of you who are landlords or represent landlords, know that there are conversations being had at the Hartford level right now to attempt to balance the scales a little bit and give landlords some kind of additional relief from the let's just not collect rent for a couple of months, right? Which again is how the executive order is being read by many across the state. So I had a question earlier, and I want to just repeat the question and just talk about it a smidge, just for 2 minutes. And that is the idea of second showings or even first showings with, mom and dad and the kids and the brother and the sister and the Great Pumpkin and Charlie Brown and Snoopy and everybody and their sister coming to see the property. Do remember that the governor's executive order prohibited that. We have rights to show property to the buyers of the property only. This particular property was or is vacant. And so the answer that we discussed was, in my opinion, you know, the last thing I want to do is beat my chest following all these rules and have that illegitimately prevent you from creating an income, right? If legitimately, did I say illegit? I think I said that incorrectly. It's not what I meant either. It's been a long day today. Words, the English language is starting to escape me. Don't worry, I will find it for 7 o'clock for your sellers. I will not be delivering that in anything but good and proper English. And yet the idea is not to follow blindly and prevent you from actually creating an income and prevent people from selling houses. And yet I do want to make sure that we recognize what the rules are because they're in place for a reason. And so because this particular house is vacant, the answer that I gave was, my opinion is, if the seller says okay to these additional people coming, again, it's the governor's order, not mine. If the seller says okay, my opinion is the buyer's agent should have the sellers go in and then come out, and then the parents go in and then come out, so that we're limiting grouping in the property. And yet, if the seller gives that okay in a vacant home, just like our forms, if the seller gives okay in a vacant scenario, you know, I'm certainly okay with it, and I'm not going to call the governor's, you know, showing police on anyone. So hopefully that answers some of those kind of questions that that have been floating around, because there's been a lot of, in the last week, a lot of, well, they won't make a decision without the parents seeing it. Well, you know, when someone lives there, that seller, there's a reason why the executive order is written that way, because we don't want to drag mom and dad through somebody else's house and risk everybody all over again. So be smart, know what the rules are, know my opinion about the rules if that matters to you, and then move forward. But in this scenario, my answer is vacant homes likely should be treated a little differently. The governor didn't carve them out, and yet I think we have an opportunity not to get crazy about some of this stuff, but still also follow the rules. So that's me talking about out of both sides of my mouth. I totally get it, and yet take from that what you will. Any questions on anything that we've covered thus far? The extension, landlords, tenants, showing other people, any of that? And yes.
I have one question. So if parents are going to go in, you would advise that they also sign a health questionnaire, correct, or not?
So if the house is vacant and the seller signed the disclosure and consent form and wrote on the bottom, because my house is vacant, it doesn't matter to me who else signs this or the health questionnaires, then it's, again, vacant houses, sellers have a right to accept anybody from those documents. With people living in them, either the sellers themselves or tenants, nobody has a right to waive that. And so I just want to be one more time clear that this is not the state's rules. These are our rules. These are rules that we put in place to help protect our sellers, your sellers, and you. Right? Tonight, I'll reiterate that the most important people on our planet are our sellers. Before they get on the call, I'm going to tell you that we did this to protect you, first and foremost, right? And so when you get pushback, don't say, well, but everyone has to do it. The governor said so. The governor didn't say so. You know, in this case, like Rick said so. And so that doesn't hold quite as much weight as Governor Lamont. People are willing to defy him all the time. So imagine when you throw my name out, right? But that's not the conversation. The conversation is, this is the policy of our office. To protect everyone involved, you know, and I'm sorry if you disagree with it. People might be upset, people might be angry, right? Those of you who are high I's and high S's, you're going to have to steel yourself and just recognize that you won't be that person's friend, at least for those couple of hours. It's okay. They'll get over it, right? Make sense? Any questions on the wiring scam form that I sent out earlier? For those of you who were on this morning, you know that we had some issues that we're attempting to get some help on, some assistance for our buyers and sellers. So if you have a pending transaction, if you could turn that form around and make sure that people are warned that this is going on, get those signatures and keep that in your file, that'd be great. There was a question earlier about will that be part of the DocuSign packet? Yes, it absolutely will, but since we wrote it overnight and released it to you in a PDF a couple of hours ago, it is not yet there. So it will show up on .loop, on, what's the new one? DocuSign, thank you, and inside of Command later this week or certainly by Monday. But until then, you have a PDF. You can certainly get that out there and follow it up with a phone call. We just don't want people throwing their money away. It's a shame that those things are happening, and yet we want to make sure that we prevent them if at all possible. Any ahas from Jason Abrams that you wanted to share before we get into any additional questions from running your businesses? Any ahas from Jason Abrams? Come on, guys, you couldn't have spent 30 minutes on.
I have 3.
Go ahead, Dan.
All
Give
right.
us the first one.
First one. I loved his take on expenses. We've been talking for a month now about reducing your expenses, reducing your expenses, reducing your expenses. And I know that my immediate thought, just because of the way I was raised, is reducing the expenses isn't about you feeling like you can't afford things, right? I'm reducing these expenses because I can't afford them. You're reducing your expenses now, so you have the money to invest in the opportunities that are about to come. All of your businesses and all of our businesses there's going to be opportunities everywhere over the next few months. And the more money you can save now is the more money you'll have when those opportunities present themselves. I love that. The second one was be the president of your database. He goes, everybody listens to the president, whether they like them or not. So be the president of your database. Talk to your people. If you have people that are struggling, give them an opportunity. He was talking about like interviewing local people, right? Interview like your local businesses and put them out in an email to your database. Helps be the person that spreads the word for the people that you are already part of your group. And then the third one, which is something that we're going to talk about to the culture committee, which was sending letters to local hospitals. Put together a letter writing campaign for people to send, words of encouragement and thanks and gratitude to all of the people working at our local hospitals. What if you were to send, a lot of people right now are sending out handwritten cards or handwritten notes. What if you were to include like 2 cards in a stamped envelope that's addressed to, Stanford or Norwalk or Danbury Hospital, and then in your note, encourage people, say, one of the things I'm doing is writing notes to our local, to the local people on the front lines. Here's 2 cards. Would you, in case you'd be interested in doing the same, right? Something that'll stick out and it's supporting our local people. I thought that was an awesome idea. And something that we're going to talk about with our culture committees as well, doing it kind of on a larger scale. But those were the 3 big ahas I had, other than the fact that guy must drink so much caffeine that I don't know how he goes to sleep at night.
So think about that for your databases as we work on something at the market center level. But man, oh man, I mean, what a great idea. Even if it's just your top 20 people in your database, to send them 2 stamped, addressed envelopes and encourage them to write a note or a letter of encouragement or a thank you to the doctors and nurses on the front lines of all of this. I think it's a brilliant idea. What else? Anything else from Jason?
I was not able to log it to join.
Well, that's not an aha.
Huh? Yeah, I wish I did.
Nobody else with an aha?
I must have taken them all, Rick.
I guess so. You're not a Sherry type person today. My biggest aha from Jason was the idea that people matter, right? And the people that you choose to have around you right now matter. And the people that you choose to listen to matter. And my guess is that there's something going on that I'm not privy to because so many people are laughing. I think me and Jeannie are the only two people that don't know what's going on. So Jeannie, let's just you and me laugh just because. Oh, enough. Come on, please. So recognize that you have an opportunity to surround yourself with the people that make sense for you to surround yourself with. You get to pick and choose that right now, especially when you have to enter in some numbers and specifically go to a Zoom room to connect with people. So choose your people wisely. Choose the people whose posts you read online, on Facebook, on wherever, wisely. Listen to people that feed your brain and your desire and your heart, and eliminate people who don't. Sitting there listening to Jason for those 29 minutes, I thought, you know what? There's a reason that I stopped everything to make sure I listened to him today. And as much as I've enjoyed some of the other people that have been on, they weren't Jason Abrams. And so if I'm going to spend time, I want it to be with people who feed me and give me energy. And the other thing that I'm going to promise to be better moving forward, starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to ratchet up that energy, man, because I'm going to tell you what, I walked away from him with so much more. And I thought to myself, you know what, we could be giving more to each of you. And so anyone who is speaking on these Zoom calls, think about that. Think about making sure that transference of energy is happening when you're the one talking, because people really need that right now. We each need that. I need that from you. It's why I love to look at all your faces to start and end my day each day, and yet really be cognizant of that, so that when you are doing your whatever, that you're diving in with all 3 feet. Make sense?
His energy is very contagious, that's for sure.
You got it. You got it.
Somebody I could have better listened to. Like, I don't think there's a better person I could have listened to than right before teaching QL. Like, it was like a perfect lead in for me. It was great.
Yeah, he's like a natural Red Bull or a cup of coffee. I mean, that should be like his middle name, Jason Red Bull. Anything else before we finish up today? If you have thoughts or ideas that you would like to share with us about ways to, because here's the other reason I mentioned that we're doing this for at least another 5 weeks. We are more than happy to have you send us cool videos that you find. More than happy to hear ideas about topics, conversations, trainings that we haven't offered yet that you think would be helpful, things that you yourself personally would love to teach or facilitate a conversation around, masterminds you want to see, panels you want to see, who do you want to hear from? Really dive in and help us help you. Because I will tell you that a month's worth of content doesn't come from nowhere, because we've just produced a month's worth of content, and I am not shy at all by saying, you know, we need some additional help, right? And so if you can push the stuff that you're seeing that you think is funny or awesome or poignant or relevant, push it all our way, and let us sort through that and figure all that out. We're going to dive back in tomorrow with our hashtag silver linings, because I kind of threw that out and then it went away. And so we're going to dive back in with that, and anything else that you can think of that would help, or that you're craving, just let us know. Let us know what you want to see, and we'll put those things in place to make sure that we our attendance is growing and not receding, and that we continue to keep everybody pumped and informed and excited and moving forward. And so stimulus payments, yes, I did hear this morning, now again today, that 1 and 2 and 3, a couple of people that we know are receiving them. So do check your bank account if you are eligible for stimulus payments. Some of you have received those today, and will likely start receiving them in the next couple of days, if not today. So congratulations and good luck on utilizing those funds. Use them wisely. Anything else before we wrap?
Hey, Rick.
Yes, ma'am.
We just added some additional processing staff on, so as to take on any new purchases and refis. So if any of you out there want to talk to your database about refinancing, it's a great opportunity, and we have lots of staff to take on that, those new loans.
Love that.
We like growing.
Not
So
for
we're
nothing.
excited.
It's also another great call, right? For those of you who are finished with your care calls, to reach back out now and have the conversation that says, hey, you know what? I was kind of taking pencil to paper the other day in my own house to reduce expenses. And I had this thought that we're in business with these awesome people who can help you refi right now because rates are so low. I'm curious, what's your current interest rate? Let's connect you with some of our mortgage partners and get you refied, because it's a great way to save people some money right now. Alrighty, guys. We will start Ignite in 6.5 minutes. We are going to be working on finishing up the listing consultation, including pricing and positioning and pricing objections. If you're hanging on for that, we'll start in 6.5 minutes. If you are not, we will see you either later at the 7 o'clock seller call. I do encourage you to be on that just to kind of hear what we're talking about with the sellers.
Rick.
If not, we will see you tomorrow at 9. Yes, who's?
It's Alex. Hi, Alex Delmar. I'm really sorry. I have a client who I'm 87% sure is going to list with me. I'm not sure whether to send them to the 7 o'clock call because it would probably be a benefit to push them over the edge, but since they're not already listed, I don't want to give them free information.
Yeah, so I encourage all active sellers, all sellers that were on the market and are temporarily off the market. They should know what's going on as well. Push them all. Push them all. Absolutely. All
right, thanks.
Cool beans. All right, guys, have an awesome evening. Ignite will start in 5. We'll see you soon. Love you. Pause my recording. There we go. So welcome to Ignite. If you remember, we left off on Monday kind of halfway through our pricing and positioning conversation, right? We had skipped the 2 macro graph conversations, which we will absolutely do today. We went through, at least quickly once, the SPA so you could hear what it sounded like, as well as get some of those words going in your head. What I asked you to do in between was read through it again and practice it once or twice. So hopefully you had an opportunity to do that, because then we'll talk a little bit about questions that you might have, and then go back through it one more time. I just want you to get the through line of it all so that we finish today with likely the anatomy of a seller transaction if we have time. I may end a smidge early today just to give me an extra couple of minutes to prep for our 7 o'clock seller call. So if you would do me the favor of allowing a 6:20 or so end time, that would be awesome, because I could use that extra 10. I appreciate that. So let me do this. Let's talk a little bit. You know, we talked about Ignite and then Ignite for our current situation, and so I want to flip a little bit to our current situation and then dive back into the script work, if that's okay. And I want to just give you an idea of some of the numbers that drive your conversations with your sellers. And in so doing, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of what I'm going to be talking about at 7 o'clock tonight. For those of you who are who will be on, you'll have a smidge more info than the rest. But the statistics that you need to get really good at developing, finding on the MLS, and communicating have everything to do with pointing to trends, helping sellers see trends so that they can start to see themselves inside of that trend or know that they want to stay out of that trend. And so two of the metrics that we're going to be talking about later tonight at 7 o'clock are listings taken. Why is listings taken an important metric to a seller?
Competition.
Yeah, because it's all about competition, right? Listings taken is the measure of the volume of competition that the seller has. Would it surprise you to know that March of 2020 compared to March of 2019, Fairfield County listings taken was up 25%. Up 25%, March to March. Right, that's comparing one March to our March to last year's March. Imagine what it would have been if from the third week or so of March, we didn't kind of skid off the runway a little bit because that's when everything started to kind of hit the fan, right? Certainly that middle week of March, that's second and a half week of March, but definitely by the third week of March, we were skidding off the runway. And so 25% up, which normally would be at least an interesting metric to discuss with your sellers, because it would show a trend in the market, right? That we were seeing the spring start to happen. However, who else has to show up with a 25% increase in listings taken? Who else has to show up in order for that to be a good thing for sellers?
Buyers.
Buyers, exactly right, right? So if the buyers don't also show up, then we could have a problem in that there's more inventory, and more inventory is not typically a good opportunity for sellers. First week of April, 19 to 20, listings taken down 64%. So if you really want to see how and where the people stopped putting their houses on the market, it's that April 1st date. That last week of March was kind of like the last hurrah, right? Down 64% year over year. This past week, down 74% year over year. So week by week, you can see the trend, right, of listings taken is going down. If you kind of compile year to date, the first 4 months or so, first 3.5 months of this year versus the first 3.5 months of last year, we're down by about 44%. When you take the fact that we were kind of flat in January and February, we're up in March and then down in so far in April. So 44% down year to date. Talk to me about how you translate that for a seller. What's the conversation?
It's a great time to be on the market, to be listed.
100%, Fiona. That is so right. Right? What else, Ninka?
That's exactly what I was going to say. What else? It's a good thing for pricing, I guess.
Well, so let's talk about that, right? So why is it a good time to be a seller if listings taken are down 44% from last year?
Well, because inventory is low then, and so you're one of the few that is offering something.
Exactly right, right? With inventory being lower, you stand out more because there's fewer homes that you're competing with. Again, this assumes that the buyers show up, right? And so what is the possible pricing conversation around just that metric?
If you're not getting showings, you're not priced correctly in this market.
Yes, like so true, Lori. Thank you for that. because if that points to any kind of a trend in less competition, that just means that if you're still not getting shown or still not receiving offers when there's far fewer homes on the market to compete with, something else is wrong, right? Something else is wrong. And what we know the answer to that what else is wrong issue is almost always is that you're simply priced outside of the market that you need to be inside of, right? Under contracts, interestingly enough, March to March, down 16% or so for all of March under contracts. That's an okay number. That might even happen naturally without something weird going on, right? But here's what's even more interesting to me. If you look at under contracts for the first week of April and then the second week of April, we are on par with week by week comparisons from April of 2019. On par countywide. Like to the point where it's like within 3 or 4 units per week. So we're right there. What does that tell you?
Market's alive. So
yeah, there is a market, right? There is a market. And so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, please recognize that what we have here is we're laying the groundwork for reality. It may feel one way. You may be hearing that it's another way. These numbers outline for us very specifically that there are fewer homes that you're competing with and buyers are still showing up at the same frequency, the same numbers as they did last year without any kind of issue going on. I'm going to tell you what, I knew the numbers were decent in terms of under contracts just because of what you guys are telling me and what we're seeing inside of our own organization. I was surprised that they were as on point as they are. If you project the next 2 weeks of April the same way the first 2 weeks of April have shown up in terms of written business, the projection of this year's April over this year's March will be an improvement of 20%. March to April of this year. That is almost what we can expect, right? Because as you move from March into April, that spring market continues to march forward and you see more and more people putting things under agreement, which is why June is one of the heaviest closing months of the year. It all happens in April, right? But here's the, go ahead, Dee.
So I had an interesting call today from a friend of mine whose husband is an attorney saying, I hate to bother you, but you might give me some statistics for April real estate. And I said, don't mind at all, of course. So I gave her the statistics, exactly what you're doing right now. And she was shocked. And yeah, and because again, the perception out there is that there's no business going on. Right,
right. And what's fascinating to me with what Dee just said, it's proof that, here's what I know. I know that of the 475 real estate agents that I'm in business with, I know that many of them are thinking that no business is going on. And so if they're thinking it, right, which is not you all, because you all are showing up on these conversations to get the real facts. And here's the other thing I know for most of you that I'm seeing on your cameras, you're out there writing business, right? Some of you have come to me and said, okay, I don't think I've ever been busier. Like, what's going on, right? And so here's the real interesting thing about when numbers start to show up. We'll see a 20% increase March of 2020 to April of 2020. However, we'll also see April to April, 19 to 20, only about an 8% drop in written business. 8% drop in written business from last year's April to this year's April. I don't know about you, but that kind of knocked me on my socks. Can you get knocked on your socks? Knocked me out of my socks? There we go. I was trying not to say knocked me on my ass, and so then I screwed up the other way, so whatever. I was really shocked by that. So what is the point? The point is, right now, it is so imperative that we deliver truthful, accurate information to people so that we can help them interpret it, they can see what's real, and then make decisions, right? Not everyone is going to make the same decisions by looking at the same data, right? Just understand that. Someone else may look at this data and come up with other conclusions. It doesn't make them wrong, usually, right? It means that they may not be willing or able to see what this is really saying based on a level of experience and knowing how to interpret these numbers. Remember, I gave you a job description a couple of weeks ago, and that job description, can anyone give me back the job description that we talked about?
Interpret the data to present the facts.
Well, we give information so that the client can make the best decision given the current market conditions.
Yeah, so if you actually take Chris's start and Ninka's finish, you have exactly what we talked about.
Well, there you go.
So Chris plus Ninka equals correct, right? And so the definition I gave
Teamwork. It's called teamwork.
Indeed,
there you go.
Indeed. The definition that I gave you was our job description is to interpret current conditions such that the client can make the best business decision possible, right? That's what we do. And it's no more evident to me than when we're running some of these numbers and getting ready to have a conversation around these numbers with our seller clients, right? So be really, really, really cognizant of the fact that without this data, many of you have sellers who aren't interested in your opinions. And frankly, none of your sellers should really be interested in your opinions. You shouldn't necessarily be interested in your opinions because your opinions are not really relevant, right? I mean, no offense, but your opinions aren't really relevant. It's the data that's relevant and the interpretation of that data that's relevant. And that's very objective. It's all very neutral, right? The neutral interpretation of this data is that when there's fewer homes on the market, competition goes up, right? Your competitors, the number of your competitors goes down, but competition for your house can go up. And and don't be afraid to use information that seems like good news for a seller. Again, they're all going to get this stuff tonight. And a lot of it is interpreted as these are really good conditions for you. Some of you are afraid to say that because you think that equates to a conversation that says, well, then it can't be my price, or maybe we should raise the price, right? They're two separate conversations. The first conversation is, generally speaking, conditions are good for a seller who is well positioned in the market. If you're not taking advantage, if your property is not seeing the benefits of that, well, then we have to have a separate discussion. And the discussion isn't about how many extra websites you're going to show up on, right? That's not the conversation, because there's only one thing that helps in that scenario. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So again, I want you to get really skilled at pulling this data and helping people interpret it. It's not always just about comps, and I think sometimes we get comp heavy. I want you to start finding trends in the numbers. I want you to start finding conversations in the numbers. It's when you do that you sound like the person that they really wanted to hire, rather than just a real estate agent. And again, I don't mean any disrespect by that. I'm one too, right? But who they really want to hire is someone who understands the economics around their house and why it's important, how it might show up, what the economic indicators are, what the trends are showing us in the market. And to be perfectly frank, other than the things that we've already talked about, the market data right now, the interpretation of it all, it's all a little bit confusing, frankly. There are really good signs. And so when people ask, well, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean for a month from now or 3 months from now? I don't know that we can necessarily infer anything from this. I can tell you what next week will look like 2 weeks from now, right? Because that's all that rear view mirror. But the trending right now is kind of all over the place, with listings trending down, and under contracts trending kind of flat, but holding their own. It's all a little bit confusing, except the things that you absolutely can infer from that data is that there is a market for well-positioned sellers, regardless. Buyers are out there. And again, if you didn't write this down the other day, write this down now, because it's something I want to hear you saying all the time. Serious sellers attract serious buyers. Serious sellers attract serious buyers. And the way people know you're serious is that you're well positioned, because they now see value in your property. Right? If no one sees value in your property, like, what are we doing? All right. I thought it was sort of fascinating. Is anyone else fascinated like I was? No? If you're bored, don't tell me. Don't disappoint me like that. Should we dive back into our scripts? Here was the point I was looking to make by bringing you through that information. We go through this script work. We look at the Brokermetric supply and demand graph as a macro chart and some macro information. We look at month supply of inventory broken down by price point as a macro conversation to help prep them for the SPA. Sometimes you've got to add a couple of other things in to just those two. If the numbers start to really speak in a direction, you can't just leave that out. And I want you to remember that you knowing all this information, you knowing what the trends are for under contracts, this isn't just for the next 5 weeks. This is forever, like for as ever as you're going to be a listing agent. These are the things that you have to start utilizing as tools, really staying up on. Never have a conversation with a seller without checking in on what these trends look like and helping them interpret those. Because that's when you're the economist of choice. Even better, when you get to have a conversation around what's driving some of those things, right? Before we went sideways in March, what we knew we could have a conversation around was our state has for the last 2 to 3 years been steadily losing high-end, high-paying jobs at big companies, right? And so does that situation alone start to outline why the higher end of our market has been stalled and the lower end of our market has been moving rather briskly? Yes, I see a whole bunch of people nodding their heads. Yes, it absolutely does explain it. Isn't that a better conversation or a more comprehensive conversation to have with a seller so that they understand the underpinnings of what's driving our market, instead of just saying, here are the best 3 sold comps, right? So your knowledge about why the markets are moving the way they're moving is as important as this script work with process. Because sometimes you have to push the pause button on the script work and answer a question if someone says, well, why is that happening? Be armed with those answers, right?
I have a question, Rick. I know, like, for instance, the absorption rate, you can get that from the MLS. But those bigger trends that you were talking about from year to year, maybe it's a very dumb question, I don't know, but where do you go to get those numbers from year to year? Because that's kind of a...
Yeah, so not a dumb question at all, Ninka, not at all. It's all those numbers are achievable on the MLS.
Okay.
Right? You just have to start using different date ranges. And,
Okay.
and some of it you have to kind of guess and extrapolate a little bit, right? There's no way to go back in time and figure out what went under contract
Okay.
in a certain week a year ago. Our MLS doesn't hold on to those dates, right? And so what I had to do was assume I had to go back into healthy markets and say, how many properties closed 60 days after the time period I'm looking at, right? So for April, I'm using June. For May, I'm using July, right? What's that 60-day lag time, and what's the percentage? And what I found to be almost always accurate is about 50% of the closings that happen in any given month occurred 60 days earlier, went under agreement 60 days earlier. So then you in order to go back in time with under contracts, you actually have to look up solds and then do some math around it. But it's all in there, right? The data is in there. It's all just a matter of manipulating it. And I don't mean manipulating it like making it false. I mean literally manipulating it, right? To make it make sense and then interpret it. All righty. So what were your questions around, hey, you know what we should do maybe first? Do you want to do the broker metrics and the absorption rate first, and then we'll slide back into the SPA? Would that be fun? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, so let me show you quickly what I'm talking about. For those of you who know broker metrics, that is not what I'm looking for. Hold on one second. There we go. So the Brokermetrics supply and demand graph is found inside of Brokermetrics. It's a system that you only have access to currently from the office, which means right now you don't have access to it. And yet if you needed something from it, you could always ask one of your staff members to pull something for you, and we will be happy to. Whoops, why are we? All right, hold on guys, because I'm struggling with getting this screen shared for you. Okay. Now I think we're all right. Are you now seeing Brokermetrics? Okay, perfect. And so for those of you who don't know Brokermetrics, I will teach a class on Brokermetrics so that you have access to this once we're actually back in the offices, because right now you don't have access to it anyway. So if you need information from Brokermetrics, let one of us know and we'd be happy to email that to you. And so the Brokermetrics supply and demand graph, just quickly, let's do it for Brookfield, why not? So the Brokermetrics supply and demand graph looks something like this. You see that? All the pretty colors, right? And what I'd like to do is just kind of run through the script that goes along with this and tell you what you're looking at and how you're using this in just a 5-minute conversation, maybe less than 5-minute conversation with your seller, right? If you remember, we left the market conditions questions the page before, and then decided to move into a kind of a macro look at the market to prep them for the micro. And so the Brokermetrics script that was in your packet right after the market conditions questions goes something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, on this snapshot of the current market, the red lines represent homes that are on the market and available. The blue lines represent homes that are currently under agreement, and the green lines represent homes that have actually sold and closed. I'm sure you can see how simple it would be to place you on the red line, but much more difficult to place you on the blue or green lines as they represent a much smaller target. Do you agree? You do want to be on the blue or green lines, don't you? That's the script. That's the whole script. right? And so sometimes some of you want to make more of this than you need to. That's as simple as it needs to be, truly. Right? All you're really having them look at when you use this is there's a lot of properties on the market, regardless of the time of the year, right? Because even in December, where you're at your lowest, there's still way more properties on the market than are going under agreement or actually closing. Would you agree? Right? And so what this allows them to see is they have a choice to make. They have to make decisions that will either just place them on the red line, which frankly we could do by closing our eyes and throwing a dart at the list of actives. We could put you on the red line, just have you on the market with any number. And yet, if you really want to be a blue or a green line, if you really want to get that much smaller target, we need to be far more precise. And it's the idea or even the word precise or precision that you're looking to have a quick conversation around, right? You want to make sure that that word pops out of your mouth or theirs. And the way you get it to pop out of theirs is to simply say, so, you know, Fiona, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but would you say that the path forward to make sure that you're on the blue or green lines just simply has you making a more precise decision about positioning than not, right? And so I love that script of, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, because the reality is it's exactly what I'm doing. I'm putting all the words in Fiona's mouth because she didn't say that. But when I say it and she agrees with it, now I get to go back later on and use it as if Fiona said it because I said it and she agreed with it. Does that make sense in terms of a script strategy?
Perfect.
I love that little phrase. You should write that phrase down. I certainly don't mean to put words in your mouth. And allow me to do just that. Make sense? For those of you who have never used this before, you see all this down the bottom here? All this, the arrows and the ups and the downs and whatnot? I will tell you that when I was using this, I would fold that under or cut it off and laminate just the actual graph, because frankly, this just confuses you and the seller. You don't need all this information. What you need is they need to see seasonality, which you can see here, right? It goes up in the summer, spring and the summer, and comes down in the fall and the winter. That's the seasonality side of things. And the other thing they need to see is everybody can be on the market. You just end up being up here, but wherever you want to be is down here, and that's far harder. It's far more, it takes far more precision. Any questions on this short graph and short script? No, right? Cool. All right, let's come back. The next page in your packet, the next 2 pages in your packet, has everything to do with you calculating month supply of inventory for your properties. This doesn't necessarily get calculated for you anyplace the way you want it. I know there are some charts in the MLS. I personally don't trust them. Maybe they're as accurate as the math that I do. I would prefer you run the numbers and do the math, because then you know you can stand behind that. So when the high C or the high D sellers say, well, where did you get this? And you say, I ran a report on the MLS. Well, did you run the report or did the MLS run the report? Right? If you get questioned on it when you've run the numbers, you get to defend the numbers. If you don't run the numbers, it's part of why I think that Toolkit CMA is at the age of the dinosaur, right? Because that Toolkit CMA thing, first of all, it doesn't do what we hope it will do. It does this weird averaging thing, and it gives you a piece of paper at the end of a report where you've chosen all these properties, and it says that the list range is between 574, 971 and 589, 692. Well, that's the stupidest thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life. right? What's the answer? And you can't defend it because you have no idea how Toolkit did the math, right? That's the bigger issue. Well, it's as big an issue as that stupid last page. So if you're still using Toolkit, I personally think you should dump it. At some point, we'll make that decision for you because we'll dump the program, but we're not doing that just yet, right? So here's the I want you to look at the absorption rate chart that I gave you in your packet, and I want you to look at the short script that goes along with it. And then I'll spend just a few minutes kind of outlining for you how you pull these numbers on the MLS so that you can build your own chart for your own town and property broken down by price bracket. But I gave you this template because something that looks like this should accompany your conversations with your sellers. So you take a look at the template. I'm going to read the script, and somebody just answer those questions, the questions that I have as I go through the script. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this chart outlines the month's supply of inventory for your entire town, as well as for different price brackets inside of the town. I'm curious, can you see how the market varies from price point to price point?
Yes.
Yeah, and so based on that information, which range is moving the fastest, would you say?
It's a 250 to 400.
The 250 to 400, 100%, right? With 7.5 months to absorb all the current inventory. And which would you say is moving the slowest?
It's kind of the middle range, the 401 to 550.
Yeah, 401 to 550. Interesting, isn't it? I mean, look at that number. 41 months. That's almost 4 years to absorb all the current inventory. And that's assuming nothing else comes on the market. Whew. So what do you think that this information tells us about how precise you'll need to be when choosing the positioning of your home?
Actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty precise, right? Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Any other questions on this? Guys, it doesn't have to be longer than that. You're not giving a dissertation on absorption rate, right? You're not like going for your doctorate in economics here. And I want you to be really cautious that you're not giving too much information when you're having some of these quick conversations. Because some of it the sellers just don't care. And some of it they don't understand well enough. And it's not necessary that they have a working knowledge of all absorption rates and all price points. What you're looking to do is give them the idea that there are some metrics we're going to use to outline pace of the market and where that pace might be a little faster and where that pace might be a little slower, so that they know if they end up in terms of choosing a positioning, you know, what if you use this conversation and someone who really should be in that 3, well, you know what, let's even take that off the table. Regardless of where they should be, if the numbers pointed them to one side or the other of $400,000, regardless of what the comp said, one side or the other of 400 is that choice. How could you use this to help them make that choice?
Well, it's a timing issue. It's the speed of being able to sell your house. It either sits there for 41 months or it can go in 7 to 8. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, 100%. That is right. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of frustration. It's a lot of things, right? Because 41 is very different than 7.5. And so when they choose 419, even if that seems to make sense, right? What if all the comps seem to point to like a high 3s number? Well, 419, if with a high 3s comp out, might not be a terrible place for them to be. except if the brackets show that anything over 400 all of a sudden comes to a grinding halt, right? And so then you get to go back and ask the question. So I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's just go back to this absorption rate conversation. That choice puts you firmly in which category in terms of month supply of inventory? Oh, well, that one, the 41 month, yes. And so I'm curious, does 41 months on the potential of 41 months, or even the potential of half that, fit in with your plans? Or is there a different decision you think you could make based on the month supply of inventory information that might accomplish almost the same thing and yet pop you into a category that's moving far faster? Right now, they get to do the work. They get to look around and say, well, yeah, I guess if we were under 4, that would make sense. Great. I'm curious, is that a position you're comfortable with? Well, yes. Excellent. And so if you're looking for a position under 4, where do you think you might want to end up? And now they're right back looking at the actives to see what the best path for them is, right? But you've utilized facts and question asking around the facts. Notice if I'm talking to D as my seller, I didn't make a nice small garbage face and say, oh, 419, ah. And I didn't tell her what the problem was. I guided her back to the information so that she could look and see the problem herself. I tell you guys, it's a far more powerful way to consult with someone instead of talking at them.
Rick?
Yes.
This is Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. Now, I know how I would handle this, but I'd like to know from you, what would be your answer to a seller if they said, well, okay, well, maybe it should be in the 250 to 400, but I'd rather price it, let's say, at 415, and we'll probably get lower offers, and we can discuss that.
Sure. Sure. So,
and how would you respond to that?
I'm going to put a pin in that for half a second, Cindy, because okay. we're going to come to the objection handling. Right? Okay. I'm going to run through each of these. We're going to come to the objection handling because I think it flows better if we get through the SPA one more time and then have that as an objection. I'm happy to answer it the way with some of the objection handlers that are in my head, and offer that out to others for their input as well.
Rick?
Yes.
These seem to be really broad categories to me. It's like about $150,000.
So this was done specifically for a seller in Woodbury 3 years ago. This was just something that I used for real. And so depending on where you're at, right? If you're in a different kind of market, if you're in a market that has higher end properties that stretch into the $1 million to $1.5 million range, well, then your categories might be a little different than what's here. This made sense for Woodbury, the way we were looking to run the numbers for the point that we were looking to make as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so if you're looking at something in Ridgefield, you might do something that's under 5. I'm not sure you need to do a 2 to 3 or a 3 to 4, right? So under 5 and then 5, depending on where your property is. If you're looking to price a property in that specific town, in the 6s or so, you may do under 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, so that people can see the narrower bands, right? Or you may broaden that depending on what all that looks like. That's why you have to run these numbers a couple of different ways to see where the argument makes the best sense. Right, and that's not to manipulate the facts, it's to help the seller see clarity without them getting confused. And so if breaking it down by $100,000 is more confusing than going a little broader, which is exactly why we did this that way, Lori, because when you broke it down by $100,000 price brackets, it got squishier and it got less clear. We wanted these people to see something very, very clear. And so we presented the data in this way to make the point that being under $400,000, that was the break point in the market. We could have run things, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, but the 3 to 4 was had a little bit more days on market. So the month supply of inventory was a little more because it didn't take into consideration how fast the 250 to 3 was moving. And so we added that in and made it $150,000 price brackets to really get that lower end number into the data.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Oh, and PS, if you're running numbers really in the high end, like in the $1 million+ range, $100,000 in a price bracket doesn't mean anything, right? That's called a price reduction. So in that range. So over $1 million, you need to start looking at probably groups of 250 or so to really bracket it out. And so you'll start to the more you play with these numbers, the more you'll see in certain towns and certain scenarios, you may have to adjust the price categories. Any questions on those two quick things? Pretty simple, right? Pretty clear? Okay. So from a through line perspective, you're asking those 7 questions. You're doing these 2 quick graphs to give them the macro picture, right? And so in this scenario, let's just use the Woodbury information. In this scenario, the seller saw that there's a whole lot of properties on the market in Woodbury, and only a small percentage of them actually go under agreement in any given month. So they have to be precise. And then we showed them bracket by bracket exactly what movement is occurring in each of those different brackets in that particular town. So we kept it macro, but we got a little more specific by breaking it down by price point, but we're still not to the micro, which is their home. All of that should probably take you less than 10 minutes. The market conditions questions, the broker metrics, quick little script, and the absorption, the month supply of inventory conversation. That is, again, it's not a big, long process. It's 10 minutes in total. And then you're right back to the SPA. And so now it will make a little bit more sense when you start with, do you have any questions on the economics and market conditions data that we discussed? Right, because now they get to think a little bit about, okay, well, we just went through those things. Do I have questions? If they say yes, great, what are the questions? And maybe you have to turn the page back and answer a specific question that they just thought of or that they didn't get answered. Just from a script perspective, one of the main reasons you ask a question, like, do you have any questions on what we just finished before moving on, is to make sure that their brain is following you into the next section. If you have a seller that's stuck on, that chart with the red lines, I didn't quite understand it. She kind of went through that quickly and I didn't quite understand it. If you don't give them a pause point and ask the question, is that clear? Do you have any other questions before we move forward? Oftentimes they don't volunteer the question, right? They don't want to interrupt you. They don't want to be rude. They don't want to look like they don't know what you said. Or they don't want to look like they didn't understand what you said. Remember, everyone wants to look good and be right, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why some sellers may not ask the question. And what happens then is you're moving forward with this whole wonderful SPA discussion, and they're still stuck on, what did the red lines really mean? And so they're only giving you partial attention because they're stuck in a step beforehand. So just from a script work perspective, make sure whether you're utilizing these scripts or some other scripts, make sure that the scripts that you use are peppered with these pause points. I call them permission-based transition steps, right? Because they are permission-based in that we're asking, okay, is it okay to move forward? And they do transition from one to the next. And so in the seller's brain, and I think in our own brains, it puts a period on the end of what we just went through and allows us to now move forward, right? And so we're all now focused on the new material instead of getting stuck on the old material, for what that's worth. And so were there any questions around, when you practiced this over the last 2 days, were there any questions around the flow? Were there any questions around what it is this really calls you to do? Or any comments on its efficiency or things that you think it's lacking? And any comments, questions, concerns around the practice that you put in? So does that mean there was no practice or there were no questions? I'm curious. So it's funny, like half of you chuckled and the other half of you looked down when I said that. You know what that tells me? Aha.
So Rick, this is Donna.
Yes.
Hi. So you know that I've been using this since I came to Keller Williams. I transitioned over because this isn't how I used to do it. And I just want to share with other people that the broker metrics section, when you put that graph down in front of them, often it is a life-changing moment for your sellers. They had never truly considered the fact that there are houses that go on the market and don't sell. That's our world. It's not theirs.
Great point.
And the whole issue about being precise, they didn't realize how precise you needed to be. You put that down, I mean, you can practically drop the mic and leave the stage. It is it's so informative. And then you back it up with the absorption rate, which lets them know, yeah, I want 715 when everybody and all the data points to 675, 680. That helps them with that. So I just want to say, I love it. I'm a convert. You know that.
And you know, what's interesting about what Donna just said is, she said something that kind of resonates with me, and it's something that I think we always have to remember, because until Donna said it out loud, I didn't really remember it. And that is, it's not their world, it's our world, right? And so sometimes we make assumptions about what they know, and my advice to you is, make the assumption that they don't know anything that you haven't brought to the table and helped them understand. Or even worse, when you make the assumption that they know all these things, they may know something completely opposite of what reality is, right? And so now they're working in this like bizarro land, and you're having this conversation about precision, and so true, right? So true that they really have to get focused on that precision. Yes, Dee, go ahead.
I just had an aha moment with what Donna said. Remember when we used to deal with the tail of the markets?
Yeah.
This is a much cleaner way, I think, of bringing that point.
Mm.
You know, we had that yellow and colorful thing, and it looked pretty, but I think it confused people.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, simpler to use this. And I don't mean to confuse people who don't know what that is, but this is very clear. And to say, you don't want to be on that red line.
Yeah.
You're out of the market.
Yeah.
You're lost. You know, I mean, that's basically what we're saying here. You're not getting sold. You want to be on the blue line. You want to be on the green line. Yeah. That's where you want to be.
Well, you know, from the perspective of being the options people, right? We bring all the options to the table. Those red lines on the broker metrics supply and demand graph, they bring to light an option that many people hadn't considered. And it's the option of failure. It's the option of, I may not succeed. And it's, what's interesting is that I've said for years that I believe that part of the reason we're in this position we're in today, with how so many real estate agents continue to push forward and do the business of the business, is because at some point over the last 20 years or so, we became more interested in winning the listing than we became in telling the truth. And I don't mean to condemn our industry. That's not my point. And yet, for those of you who have been around for a while, I challenge you to disagree with that, because I think if you're really honest, right? I know for me, prior to doing it this way, the old way of doing things, of course we didn't want to lie to people, and we weren't purposefully misleading them, but it was more about how are we going to do all the fancy marketing to win the listing. We became an industry of competition with each other, brand to brand, agent to agent, and less of an industry about true partnership and consultation with the client.
So true.
First and foremost. And what I believe about this is that this just returns you to a very neutral, objective place that takes all that other crap and makes it not part of the conversation, right? It doesn't really matter how many homes I've sold in Bethel when I'm working this way. It doesn't matter who my professional photographer is when I'm working this way, because what I focus on and what I specialize in is helping you understand the decisions that you need to make to be successful. All the other stuff, I believe, is just foundational. Everybody does all that other stuff. And when we make our value proposition about all the fancy stuff and not about the stuff that really matters, I think we set ourselves up for the fall.
It's so true. I think the conversation of the SBA for a seller, that's the only conversation worth having. I mean, that's it. And it's funny. I mean, my question is this a Keller Williams, because we call it the SBA, is it specific to Keller Williams? Or would you say that most of the people in the industry approach things this way? Because when we sold our house in Alabama, this is 10 years ago, it sat, and we thought that the realtor was the expert. It sat for more than a year. We had 2 mortgages going. We lost well, whatever the amount was. We lost a lot of money on the house. And we said, why didn't you tell us right away that the market, the way it's going now, you're not going to get, you know. And so is this Keller Williams specific or is this something that everybody, because I think it's really good. So I don't know if it's just us or.
So it's certainly not an everybody. And it's certainly not a Keller Williams thing. This is something that for those people who were in our market centers 10 years ago, we developed together. We developed our top agents and our ALCs sat down during the last shift and said, if we keep losing on price, because that's what was happening in the last shift, we were going in and telling a version of the truth, and we kept getting beaten out by people who didn't seem to think the truth mattered, right? And so we asked the question of ourselves, how could we do this differently to present facts to people? And it was from the masterminding of those 20 or so people that we came up with this version. And I have to give some credit to Sue Adler because we looked around for people who were doing it differently, and Sue Adler, who works in the Summit, New Jersey market, was doing a version of this. And so we kind of took it, we adopted it, we named it the SPA, that group of us who were working on that. And so it's something that's unique to the people in our world, because it's something that we created to solve a problem that presented itself for our agents 10 years ago.
I think it's great. Really?
I would add one more thing, which is I'm sure Donna and Dee and anybody else who uses this routinely can confirm. The sellers say, you sound different, because you do sound different. And it differentiates you. B, it helps to bring them clarity, because a lot of sellers are continue to be confused by the market, and this brings clarity, and they appreciate that.
Yeah. And what's awesome about it is that, to me, this when you come at this so objectively and from such a neutral position, what you're doing is you're laying the groundwork for an objective conversation. It's not about getting the listing. It's not about pleasing anyone, right? It's not about pleasing anyone. I was on the phone with our leadership team this morning, and one of the things that we talked about was listening to Gary yesterday and putting it together with my own personal experiences in the last 3 to 4 weeks. At some point, you have to make a decision about who you're going to be, right? And what we do is not about making people happy. Right. And I think so many of us live in that spot of, if people aren't happy, somehow that's a reflection on my abilities. And what I would say differently to you is, when you make the choice to, it's not about making people happy, it's about leading people to a result. Right. And there's a reason why people say leadership is lonely, right? Sometimes the decisions that one makes to help lead people forward are not popular. This whole process, being as objective as it is, I think aids you, if that's not a natural thing for you, right? Because it's not natural for many people. And frankly, I think it's being more and more objective and being more and more consultative is a skill and a muscle that we have to all continue to build and work on. And this process lends itself to, it is what it is. Right, and it gets to a point where Fiona and I are having that conversation. We get to say, we may just have to agree to disagree on how we're interpreting the data, and that's okay. Trust me, I still took listings if we agreed to disagree. Just because you say I agree to disagree doesn't mean you're walking out the front door. You get to make some of those decisions. If it's a little higher than you think it makes sense, but you don't want to lose it, as long as you've had that conversation with the seller to say, we may just have to agree to disagree on that. And so let's talk about how we could move forward together, right? There are scripts for that. There's isolation scripts for that. So I'm curious, Fiona, other than us coming to an agreement on the positioning of your property, is there any other reason why you and I wouldn't go into business together this evening? Right, and so we're going to isolate it. Is it just about us agreeing on the price? And Fiona says, well, no. Great. I'm really excited to be your listing agent. Let's figure out a way that we can make that work together. Where are you? Where does the market seem to indicate you need to be? Right? And I understand that conversation is not about Fiona saying that I'm at 600 and Rick saying I'm at 550. Because that's still going to be asked as a question. So Fiona, tell me, where do you believe you need to position the property to come out whole on this? And Fiona says, okay, $600,000. Great, and based on our review of all the relevant data, the facts that we spent some time on, where do you believe the market says that the home really needs to be to outperform all of the other competition? And so now Fiona's gonna get a little weird, right? Because she's not going to want to say the real number. But see, when you approach it that way, instead of you saying, well, I believe it needs to be at 550. Again, no one asked you, nor is it relevant where you think it needs to be. Fiona needs to know where she wants to be and where the data seems to indicate she should be. The differential is between Fiona and Fiona. Do you see that? It's not between you and Fiona, or else right from the beginning we're in a contentious relationship, and it's a you said why didn't you tell me, right? So instead, Fiona picks the 600, and then I ask that second question, and she looks at me. Well, what do you mean? Well, based on all the data, you're choosing the number that you've put on the table. Where do you believe the data really puts us? And again, you're going to make the choice that you're going to make. This is a partnership conversation. It's not about right or wrong. It's about what the market seems to indicate and what your desire is. And sometimes those are two different things. And so when you ask that question, eventually Fiona gets to put on the table, well, maybe more in the like 575 range. Got it. And so what I'm hearing you say is you're desiring to perhaps position the property about $25,000 or so outside of where the market really says you'll get the most action. And then Fiona gets to either say, well, yes or no, right? And it's not about me arm wrestling her to where I believe she should be. It's about asking her questions to make sure that she understands the choice that she's making, as long as I'm still okay listing it at 600 versus 575, knowing that in 2 or 3, because then we move into that conversation to say, so if the market does not perform the way you're expecting it to perform, knowing that you're going to be looking for a number $25,000 or so outside of where the market is telling you the property will perform best, are you agreeable to that time period of about 14 to 21 days of market intel to come back and have another conversation? And then she gets to say yes or no, right? When you're unattached, when you can continue to ask questions around someone's decision and you're unattached to the answers, because if she says, yes, I will come back, great. Well, why don't we do this so that we don't have to necessarily have another appointment? Why don't we just make the decision tonight how you'll move forward? So in 14 days, what move do you think you'll make? And Fiona gets to say, well, I guess I would move from the 600 to the 575. Great. So you know what, as we fill out our documentation, we're going to proactively put that in writing, and so that we can just kind of enter that into the system. And so it automatically will, just so we don't lose any time, it'll automatically then take that adjustment for you on day 14. How does that sound? And if she says, no, I'm not willing to do that, then we get to have a conversation around that. Okay, well, talk to me. What do you see as the best path forward? How long do you believe the market needs to give you the intel that you need to make the next best decision, right? Just keep asking questions. When we talk about a consultative style of real estate, this is what we're talking about. This is consultative versus presentational. This is you continually asking questions, right? Objection handlers aren't you coming up with, oh, let me say these 7 sentences or these 5 words to magically wave a magic wand over the situation and have them say, oh, now I understand. It's one-on-one consultation. It's one-on-one conversation, right? It's why I was on the, Fiona and I were on the phone with one of her sellers a couple of weeks ago, just because they were struggling making some decisions. And what was so frustrating to me, Fiona, about that, well, you probably know what was frustrating to me about that phone call, but what was frustrating to me about that phone call was they were so unwilling to allow a direct conversation around their scenario, right? And so much of this doesn't work well when you have people who are looking in from the outside, right? There seemed to be a distrust of the conversation, and so there were walls up, and without the ability to have a really direct, okay, let's look at the data and point back to the data, some of it ended up just kind of being more of a conversation of what if instead of factual, right? Would you agree with that, Fiona? Or that was the frustration about that conversation.
Yes, I would. And then now putting in a new bathroom, they're not willing to lower the price.
Well, there you go. So now they can spend money and lose money.
Yep. Great.
Right. And again, at some point, we have to be okay with their decisions, right? Because people are allowed to make bad decisions, right? It happens all the time. People make bad decisions all the time. And as long as we can communicate that we can agree to disagree on that path forward, okay, right? Whew, okay. I hope that was a helpful conversation because I think it really gets at the root of how this is different. It's not just the words. You've got to take the foundational concept of true consultation.
Rick?
Yes. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. I wanted to ask you a question. I have these clients that I priced their house strategically back in February. And they had so many offers on it, it was unbelievable. And they accepted an offer. But as it turned out, the buyer ended up, her brother was going to help her finance it. He ended up dying of the coronavirus. And We lost the sale, and the bank didn't support the final sale price, but she was going to make up the difference. So now, to put the house back on the market, she's convinced that even though we had listed it initially at $389, and they accepted an offer for $430, that it's really a $430,000 house. So now she wants to, so we got her down to $415. She's got a very good offer that just came through for $405, and she refuses to look at it. Then she decided, okay, she'd look at it. They did an inspection. The inspector didn't come up with the same inspection with regard to the well, regard to the septic. The first inspection said the septic was fine. The second inspection said the septic is not fine. So she is absolutely adamant that this new offer is, they're corrupt, they're crazy. She doesn't want the agent walking into her house anymore. She can't believe this could be happening. They've got to be making something up. Anyway, this is
yeah,
really
so here
a conversation about, and she only will do like text back and forth for the most part.
So first and foremost, you cannot accept text only. You simply cannot tolerate that. You have to get firm and explain to this person that in order for us to have the conversations we need to help you get to the end result you're looking for, we must be able to speak. Please let me know when you are available to have a phone conversation, because texts are simply not, they're just simply not the right method for that. That's first and foremost. Second, you just described the kiss of death scenario, right? For any of you who have ever been there, right? When somebody sells a house higher and then all of a sudden it doesn't pan out, it is the kiss of freaking death. And it sounds like you have a double kiss of death whammy, because now you have two different septic inspection issues. The simple reality is that one person who was willing to offer and pay $430,000 was the needle in the haystack. And unfortunately, they didn't close. Right? And so do you think it's wise, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to wait around for a second once in a lifetime buyer who's not only willing to overpay for the property, but make up the difference when the property doesn't appraise?
And particularly at this time when all this is going on, correct?
But yes, this time and any time, right? And I would encourage each of you to not get sucked into the conversation of, well, it's different now, or it's better for you to, don't push that now, because what sellers hear is you making an excuse.
Okay.
Right? That's what sellers hear. Oh, well, so now she's just going to blame what's going on, right? So I would have conversations. You may have noticed, right? Many of you have been listening to me for the last 4 weeks. God help you. And yet, have you ever heard me one time in the last 4 weeks say any of the words that we hear all the time on the news? I haven't said the C word that Barbara just said, either one of them. I haven't said the word, well, I won't say them, so I'm not going to give you the list of the words that I haven't said. I say things like our current environment, the issues that are occurring outside of our four walls. I keep describing it like that. I refuse to get sucked into, on your behalf and my own, I refuse to get sucked into a discussion about something so specific, because it really isn't relevant. We're shifting quickly, and we have to react to a quick shift, regardless of what's driving it. It doesn't matter what's driving it, right? It doesn't matter. So I would be cautious around having conversations around the issue, right? The current issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out well for you long term, right? And at the end of the day, I think you need to drive this seller, like any seller, back to factual data. What are the best 3 sold comps for this property? If they support $430,000, well, now you get to go back to the buyer's agent and say, look, the comps support this. Get your people up. If they don't support it, And it sounds like you have an external appraisal that will give you exactly what the number is, right? You had an appraisal done. That's the number. If someone's willing to pay that number, well, then they should be thrilled and go running into the sunset, smiling and skipping. Right?
Yes.
All right. So crap, we didn't get to a lot of what I thought we were going to get to. We should have all day Ignite classes. That's what I think. We should start at like 10 and go until 9:30 at night. Just solve all the problems of the world.
Okay.
There's that groupie. All right, so Cindy put something on the table before, and I want to make sure that we kind of answer it from the perspective of objection handling, because it was a fair objection that many of you may come across, right? And so Cindy, just remind us of the objection.
So let's say our facts show the house should be listed like at 350. And when we ask the seller, where would you like to position your home? And they want to go to 415 or 420. How would you respond to that?
Got it. So are you willing to play with me a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So Cindy, based on, so now I'm right back into the script, right? We've given Cindy the 3 best comps. We've given her the current competition in the range. I remind her, so Cindy, the main data point from the market conditions information we discussed earlier was the word precise. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Excellent. And so when you combine that, the idea of being precise with the comparable factual data that we just reviewed, where do you feel you should position your property to outperform any and all of the other properties for sale?
Well, I know where it should be. I agree with your price, but those buyers always come in low. So I'd rather go to maybe 415 and, maybe they'll come up to 400.
Got it. And so let me ask this, Cindy. You said that you kind of knew from the factual data where it should be. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? What is that
based on what you showed me and the graphs and everything, I understand that it should be around 350. But if I put it at 350, I'm going to get offers of 300 and 301. So why don't we just go higher and we'll deal with the offers as they come.
Got it. And so Cindy, I'm curious, are you aware of the difference between competition and negotiation?
Well, explain what you mean.
Sure.
I'm not sure exactly I understand.
So when you position a property for negotiation, which is ultimately what you're proposing as a strategy, right? List it higher so that we can negotiate. Yes?
Right.
Right. So when you position a property for negotiation, in my experience, I have found that negotiation is exactly what you receive. Alternatively, when you position a property for competition, meaning that buyers will come to the market and kind of look at your property and start to get worried that if they don't make a move quickly, someone else might. When you position it for competition, competition is what you receive. So now you have people kind of fighting over the house. So I'm curious, which do you think is better for your bottom line? Positioning for negotiation or for competition?
I understand what you're saying now, and I think competition.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so knowing that competition is the better path for your bottom line, where do you think you're comfortable positioning the property? Again, so that it outperforms all of the other competition on the market.
Well, based on the data that you showed me, I'd have to agree that it would probably be 350.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you, Cindy, I think you're making an excellent decision on that. I think you'll find qualified buyers quickly to make sure that you can get where you're looking to go. So is that a decision you're willing to now put in ink? Can we move forward and sign this sucker up?
Let's move forward.
All right.
Thank you, Rick. That was
You're welcome.
awesome. Learning the difference between competition and negotiation. That's a perfect thing to know.
Yeah, that's my favorite one when people are looking to go higher, because it really helps people kind of recognize that it's kind of like, remember that Facebook commercial where the woman was like sticking pictures on her living room wall, and the other woman says, "What are you doing?" She says, "Oh, I'm putting pictures on my wall." It's like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, right? That to me is that's that script, right? We have to help people understand that it may sound like that makes good sense, but let's really get into the nitty-gritty of how this really works, because that's not how it works, right? And I think the competition versus negotiation script really helps there. Are there other scripts that you guys have used really successfully? Because that's just one. Are there other things that you've used successfully to help people recognize that that's maybe not the best path for them? One of the things that pops up as an objection a lot, it's sort of what Cindy said, and yet slightly different. It's the objection of where on this list of actives do you think you want to position the property, and they simply choose higher for no real apparent reason, right? And so it doesn't come complete with the, well, I'm afraid they're going to make me a lower offer. They just choose in a scenario that should be 350. They just choose, 400. Now here's the thing. Remember, we talked about before. Don't make the seller wrong, because the second you make the seller wrong, you have lost the conversation. And so in a scenario where Cindy might say, I think 400, or maybe even a little higher, like maybe 409, makes the best sense. You can dive right back into the script, because that's this objection handler is right in there at the bottom, that says, great. In order to be sure, right? So you're not saying, oh, that's a horrible choice. Why would you do that? You're all wrong. That's not what this says. Are you blind, right? You're not saying any of those things. Instead, you get to say, I completely understand your position. Let me ask this. In order to be sure that we can justify this number to any buyer or their agent or their appraiser, can we just dive back into the data for a minute and find, like, what specific evidence exists that supports that number that you just chose? Right? You're going to push it right back on the seller. What evidence exists? Because you're pointing them right back to the facts. I will tell you, my record for saying that same line over and over and over again is 5 times to the same seller. Because I said it once, and the seller said, well, we need to sell it for higher. I completely understand. Many sellers have that same issue. And yet I'm curious, what specific evidence exists in the facts that we reviewed that could support that? Just ask the same question. Did you ever call your credit card company and ask them to do something, and the person who's on the other end of the phone said no? I don't fight with that. I say, okay, thank you very much, click, and I call back and I ask the same question to somebody else. And oftentimes they say, oh, sure, we can do that. So it's the same technique, right? I will tell you, by the 5th time I asked that question, I was helping an agent get a price reduction. Some of you may never ask me to do that ever again. But the idea of, by the 5th time that I asked the same question, I changed it a little bit, and I said, look, Mrs. Just, because she was getting so hot under the collar, she was so irritated and frustrated with the conversation. And I said, look, it is clear to me that you are frustrated. And I'm guessing that the root source of your frustration right now is probably me. And I apologize for that, because that is not my intent. My intent is to help you make the best decision that you can possibly make. And so I'm asking this question because it is so critically important. And so at the risk of you, this is what I said to her, at the risk of you punching me in the nose, what specific evidence exists in the data that supports that higher number? And she said, nothing. There is no evidence that exists. And then she started to cry. And then we got to have a real conversation, right? But it took 5 times, and I'm not making that up. Kathy Becerra was sitting in the room when her and Victor asked me to help them get that price reduction 100 years ago. They can verify 5 times. Kathy and Victor, I think, were ready to jump out the window because they couldn't believe that I just kept asking her the same question because she was clearly getting annoyed. But see, I take very, very seriously my job to help people make really good decisions. And so I'm willing to be the bad guy. I'm willing to have people to be frustrated with me, and I don't take it personally. And what I've learned over time is that at some point, many of them understand why I'm being as seemingly rigid. Right? It's like when I start Ignite, and I say to you guys, when we have conversations about you doing the homework, which you escaped tonight because I didn't ask you about your next 30%. When I ask you about it and you don't get the have the answers of, yes, I'm doing the homework, sometimes I take a firmer stand on your income than you are willing to. And that doesn't feel good. It feels like you're getting scolded or like, who are you? Well, sometimes sellers feel similar to that, but you're taking a stand for their own good. It's like I said at 4:30, right? I said that I'm not willing to relax our position on people signing those forms to show houses. I'm simply not willing to do it. And I'm not willing to do it because I take a stand for the health of the people that we're in business with. Starting first and foremost with the people whose faces I'm looking at right now. And then of course, all of our sellers and all of the families that are connected to all those people. That means something to me. And so therefore, we've got to do what we've got to do. And sometimes people are upset about it. Sorry. Be okay taking a stand for someone else. That's different than taking a stand for you being right. Those are two different things, right?
Would you say that again, Rick? Please?
I hope so. I think what I said was, did anybody write it down? I think what I said was, you taking a stand for someone else.
Not the same as your.
Say it again, Debbie.
Be willing to take a stand for someone else. And what you're saying is for the good of somebody else.
Yes.
Not for your own good, not a stand for yourself. It's not that whole thing of I'm standing on principle. Mm-mm. It's doing what's best for the other person.
Yeah. And it certainly isn't you taking the stand for taking the listing, right? It has nothing to do with your income. It has everything to do, because frankly, your income skyrockets when you are more willing to take a stand and end up on the losing side. If you're not attached to the result, you will be more consultative. You will take a firmer stand on helping people make great decisions. And then again, you also have to recognize, and I know it's 6:28. Thank you for those of you who keep privately messaging me saying, you're late, you're late. I'm going to go till 6:30, big surprise, right? So recognize that you have this awesome opportunity to back off at some point. And what that means is the more objective and consultative that you are, and the more you practice that, you'll start to know exactly how much you can push. Right? Because at first you'll hold back. At first you'll be a little tentative. And then you'll realize that when you say some of these things that we're asking you to say and use some of these processes that we're asking you to use, they actually work. And so then all of a sudden you're a little less afraid to go down that path. And the next time when someone challenges it, instead of backing down right away, you'll throw up an objection handler once. And when you start to see some results, you start to be able to feel people out, right? I'll know if I'm having a conversation with Chris when he's ready to say, okay, this guy's a total asshole. Please get him out of here, right? I can sense that. I know how far I can go because I'll read his body language. I'll read it in his eyeballs. And so at some point, I may decide to back off to say, you know what, Chris, this sounds like one of those scenarios where we may need to agree to disagree. And so I'm curious, other than you and I agreeing on a positioning for your property, is there any other reason why you and I wouldn't go into business together? Like, let's separate those two things out. And if Chris says no, then great. I'm excited to be your listing agent. Let's do this. Let's come up with a plan to move us forward on the positioning thing while we're filling out the rest of the paperwork. Trust me when I tell you, you can be hired without having an agreement on a number. There are talented real estate agents who do it all the time across the country. There are talented real estate agents who do it all the time in your office. So take that mindset shift. Know that sometimes you're operating from a scarcity mentality instead of an abundant mentality, right? That mindset of abundance is all about, let's push and challenge on behalf of someone else, get them right to a point of either final agreement or disagreement, and let's decide to move forward anyway, even if we're in disagreement. And you'll find that number for you. Because sometimes the disagreement, if Chris says I want to list it for $795 and it should be on for $695, I'm no longer interested, right? Chris, let's do this. It sounds like you and I it sounds like you and the market are enormously far apart in terms of where you'd like to position. And so what I'd like to suggest is this. I have some folks that I think would be more than willing to be in business with you for the first 3 to 6 months. And what I'd like to do is set up an appointment with you kind of 6 months from now, just in case the property still hasn't sold, so that you and I can have a conversation about me taking that over and really bringing you across the finish line. But until then, I think you may be better suited with one of my colleagues. And then go refer it to somebody that you don't like. All right, guys, I do have to prep for our seller meeting. I hope this was helpful. I appreciate your attention and your time. Watch for an email with where we're going to go from here on Friday, because now I have no idea what we have left to do. So let me regroup on that and let you know where we're headed. Have a great night. See you at 7 o'clock for those of you who are going to be on.
Thank you.
Sure thing. See ya.
Thank you.